Should we be training according to our cycle? Why or why not?
The issue long-term with Pilates for muscle growth is that it typically introduces a lot of these stability challenges when we're adding load, let's say in a reformer type situation. And when we're in an unstable position, the amount of force that we're able to produce against the resistance is going to be drastically minimized. And if you're somebody who is lifting weights, doing high intensity exercise performance, you might find that around 5 grams of creatine per day will get you that extra rep. So we talked about if you do a set of 10, but you can't quite get that 11th, maybe it gets you the 11th. And that's about where the benefits end.
What you're saying is that creatine is not kind of the essential supplement of menopause.
No, there is no essential supplement of menopause.
Welcome, Lauren, for coming on to the Save Yourself podcast today. I am so excited to get into so many of the things, hot topics, the interesting things, I think, for discussion about women's health, especially around that perimenopause, menopause transition. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, before we get started, I wanted to give you a little bit of let the audience know a little bit about you, and wanted to kind of go over your bio, but also wanted you to have a chance to kind of tell us, I'm really interested in like, how did you get into this space? Like, what is it that really excites you? So I'll start with your bio. Lauren Colenso-Semple is a science communicator specializing in female physiology, muscle adaptation, and sports nutrition. She holds a PhD in integrative physiology from McMaster University and a master's in exercise science from the University of South Florida. Her research explores how ovarian hormones impact the body's response to exercise with a focus on optimizing training and performance for women. In addition to her academic work, Lauren is a seasoned fitness professional with extensive hands-on experience in strength and conditioning. Welcome, Lauren. Actually, before you tell us about you, what is one of the things that people just get completely wrong? I know there's a lot, but when it comes to women's physiology, exercise, or in general, like what's the biggest mistake that everyone is making?
I think the biggest mistake is this assumption that everything is extremely different for women and that women need drastically unique recommendations when it comes to exercise or nutrition than men.
I love that. Okay. Now tell me a little bit of how you got into the space, a little bit about you.
So after my undergraduate degree, I worked just part-time, kind of for fun at first, as a fitness professional. And I was really digging into the exercise science and muscle physiology literature, really just to try to optimize my own results and those of my clients at the time. And ultimately, I noticed that there was a way more research in men than there was in women. So when I decided to go back to graduate school to pursue a master's and then subsequently the PhD, it was really important to me to try to fill some of those gaps and identify some of those sex-based differences if they existed.
Yeah. So, and that's interesting because you basically went to school, you're training for that, but you came out kind of thinking like, it's not as crazy different as people make it out to be. Like, for example, I think the biggest thing I saw, well, a few of the big hot topics that I saw that you've been talking about recently is like training according to your cycle. Tell us about, should we be training according to our cycle? Why or why not?
You should not be training according to your cycle. And a lot of these programs that are promoted on social media, they promote a style of training where you're constantly switching things up. So this week you're lifting weights and next week you're doing yoga. And that's just not conducive to optimal progress and reaching your goals. If we want to build muscle, get stronger, get faster, improve flexibility, whatever the goal is, we need to do it consistently. And by constantly switching how we're exercising, we're really delaying our progress. It's also just not supported by the data that our shifts in hormones affect how we need to exercise, how we perform, how we adapt to those exercise related stimuli. And so, unfortunately, this kind of cookie cutter programs that say, oh, you're in this phase and you have these hormone profiles, and therefore you should do this. It's really more of a marketing tool than an evidence based solution. Because in the research setting, having studied and measured many, many cycles, tracked tons of ovulation, measured a lot of blood hormones, I can tell you that this anticipated hormone profile that people are kind of using as part of this marketing tool is not reflective of many women, because cycle length varies, ovulation timing varies, and therefore the timing and the magnitude of these hormone fluctuations is highly variable between women.
I love that, because I think it's what you're saying is you don't have to keep switching things up every time something changes in your cycle, but you could use your own cycle to adjust as necessary. Like, I'm not sure if you believe in, like, so for example, for yourself, or say for me, I notice that when I'm in my premenstrual, like late luteal phase, I'm not lifting as heavy and I'm not as pushing myself as hard, just intuitively, because I'm like a little more tired or I have less energy to do that. So what would you recommend? Is it like a personalized approach, or is it like, just adjust intuitively?
It's very, very individualized, because I will hear from some women, I feel my best when I'm on my period. I always get a PR when I'm on my period. And then I hear from other women, the couple days before I get my period, I am so drained and I couldn't imagine going to the gym. So I think it's important that we are kind of reactive when we experience those days, as opposed to planning on feeling worse. Because the problem with saying, oh, for this whole week, you are going to have worse performance, you'll feel tired, you're probably going to have symptoms. Now that I've planted that in your mind and you're expecting it, then that's a problem as well. So I think we should feel free to skip the gym or reduce the intensity or switch up an exercise. All of those things are totally fine, but let's do it when there's an issue, when we are feeling that way, as opposed to these kind of pre-planned changes.
I love that. Okay, hot topic. Is it bad for women to exercise fasted?
It's not bad to exercise fasted. This is sort of a new, as you said, very hot topic or big claim that we're seeing on social media. And it's interesting because 10, maybe 15 years ago, people thought fasted training was excellent because it was going to be better for fat loss. And so people did the science and they realized, okay, you might be utilizing more fat as fuel acutely during that 30, 60 minutes. But if you do that fasted exercise for 10, 12 weeks, there's no difference in fat loss. And so we have these studies in men and in women. And this idea that fasting would somehow be problematic for women, that you're going to lose lean mass or accumulate more body fat, these are not true. We have the data to support it. Any concerns about fasting and cortisol are sort of a misunderstanding of cortisol in and of itself. It's true that prolonged fasting increases cortisol. It's also true that all forms of exercise increase cortisol, but this is normal physiology and it's not something that we need to be concerned about, and we don't need to avoid certain activities, for fear of cortisol fluctuations.
Yeah, I think that's a big topic on social media. It's like, oh, I shouldn't fast because I'm going to raise my cortisol levels in the morning. And it's like, you need cortisol in the morning. I mean, it's normal to have cortisol in the morning. And with any kind of, and fasting is a stressor, just like any other stressor, a good stressor, if you recover from it properly. So what is your views on intermittent fasting in general?
I think it's a tool that can be used. The main value of the tool is when you decrease your feeding window, that can help you create a calorie deficit. So if you're somebody who is trying to lose weight and shortening that window helps you create that deficit, then that's absolutely fine. It's certainly not this magic fat loss bullet. It's just a tool. And I don't think there's any reason to do really extreme fasting protocols like full days or 3 days or that I think is probably not beneficial. But if we're
Yeah.
thinking, oh, you don't start eating until 11 o'clock or noon or something like that, which is typically the types of protocols people are implementing, it's not harmful. It's just a preference.
Yeah, I think it's a preference. And for me, I find that it's a daily, like it's a change, it changes depending on how late I had my last meal or like what I'm doing as my workout or what time, what the day looks like. And there are days that I fast for my workout and there's days that I don't work out till a little bit later. And so I'm eating before. And so I always say that there's nothing wrong with fast, at least I feel like the data doesn't really say anything bad about fasted workouts. It's not necessarily, like you said, a magic bullet. It's not going to like get you all these amazing results, but it's definitely. So what you're saying is it's definitely not the case that as a woman, you should be like avoiding intermittent fasting.
We have no data to suggest the results or effects of fasting are different for men or for women. And so I'd say, regardless of your sex, it should be used as a tool if you want to use it. And as you said, you don't have to use it every day. And the problem with some of this messaging is by telling people they should be terrified of training fasted, then some people who like to go to the gym first thing in the morning feel like, oh, well, if I have to get up even earlier because I'm supposed to make breakfast before the gym, I don't want to do that. So I won't go to the gym at all. And that's the biggest issue. Anything that we are doing that ends up discouraging people from regular exercise is a huge, huge problem, in my opinion.
I agree. And I have so many women who message me on social media or talk to me in the clinic or online, and they're saying exactly that. I wake up at 4:30 a.m. That's the only time I can go to the gym. Like how I don't understand how I'm supposed to eat a breakfast or even like I think somebody's like they're recommending like a protein coffee or whatever it is. And I said exactly that. Like, why? Like, it doesn't matter. Just go to the gym, do your workout, and then eat when it's appropriate for you. Like, it doesn't need to be. You don't have to wake up at 3:30, like or 4, to like whatever
Yeah.
to kind of get that done. I think it's really, honestly, it's kind of misleading, but also dangerous for people to be listening to this advice and changing all of their practices.
And people who are promoting this seem to act like there's this reset every morning and we didn't eat the night before and we still have stored glycogen. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
like the body just clears out overnight and we're on empty.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that people ask. I'm glad you brought that up. So, if you are lifting heavy in the gym, first thing, do you need to eat before that?
No, the only case in which I would say it might be a good idea to have some food is if you are doing really, really long, intense endurance exercise. I wouldn't suggest running a marathon fasted, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
Um, but the way that most people are training 45 minutes, an hour, whether you're lifting weights or doing a circuit or doing a group fitness class, whether you're lifting heavy or lighter, it's fine. Either way, you will build muscle. Either way, the lifting is the stimulus for the growth. And these nuances around nutrient timing are not important because we know that, again, it's not like our body kind of resets. We already have stored glycogen that is going to fuel our exercise performance. If you find with some self experimentation that having a meal or two meals before you go to the gym improves how you feel in the gym or improves the weights that you're able to lift, that's possible. In which case, if you can arrange it, then arrange it that way. But it isn't as if there's something inherently bad about training fasted.
Is there anything else about women's training that really bothers you on the internet? Because I know there's a lot, but is there something that people have been saying, kind of these talking heads have been saying that is really misleading?
There are a few things. One for training specifically, one is around cardio, and that if you're in the post menopause stage of life, that you should stop doing any sort of low or moderate intensity cardio and just do high intensity interval training or sprint interval training. And this is really not supported by any data at all. Whatever sort of cardio you're doing should be conducive to your goals and preferences, because what you'll do long term is what you should do.
Yeah.
But there's certainly nothing inherently harmful about doing lower or moderate intensity. And I don't like this message because, again, this when we demonize something, when we say this is bad for you, then we're discouraging people from exercising.
Yeah, I think that is really dangerous. And like you said, I think to tell women that there, or anyone, that there are these rules that you have to follow, I think it kind of takes away from the whole point of exercise, at least for the longevity piece, is like finding types of movement that you enjoy, that you can repeat, rinse and repeat, like literally every day, or every few days. And it has to be something that makes sense for you and your life and what you enjoy. And then, of course, you can use the research to supplement that. Like, maybe, for example, I don't really enjoy lifting weights at all. And I've always found, jogging or like cardio based exercises to be really enjoyable, all these different types of and I've kind of learned that I have to incorporate some kind of weight training. Now, one thing I wanted you to clarify with that is that I think that on the internet there's this entire push to lift heavy. And for me, as someone who has been a cardio junkie all her life, I had just started lifting weights a few years ago, and I still feel like I'm not lifting as heavy as, I should. And so tell us about this whole notion of like, we have to lift heavy.
It's not that it has to be heavy per se, it's that it needs to be challenging. And so if take a given exercise, you can probably do 5 repetitions of that exercise with a heavier weight. You can do 10 repetitions of that same exercise with a slightly lighter, or maybe you can do 20 of that same exercise with an even lighter. They all need to be challenging, meaning if you're doing 10, it should be difficult to get that 10th,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe impossible to do 12. That's the
Right.
kind of hard that we're aiming for, but that can be accomplished doing the heaviest weight for 5 or the lightest weight for 20, as long as it's hard enough. And what is challenging for you will also change over time. So if you're somebody who's never really done any lifting at all, some exercises just with body weight will be
Mm-hmm.
challenging at first. And then maybe next month we can start adding dumbbells, or if you have access to a commercial gym, machines are a great place to start if you're a beginner, because it kind of reduces a lot of the technical
Yeah.
difficulties with form. But it's really important that when we think about lifting weights, it doesn't matter what rep range you're doing. There are no must do exercises. Free weights and machines are equally beneficial. So however you can do it that works for you and that you'll do it consistently, that's what you should do.
What about something like a Pilates or yoga? How do you feel about that?
Again, all physical activity is good, but if we want to talk about for muscle specifically, as I said before, in the beginning, anything you do will be a little bit effective. So if you start doing Pilates, maybe you'll grow a little bit of muscle. The issue long term with Pilates for muscle growth is that it typically introduces a lot of these stability challenges when we're adding load, let's say in a reformer type situation. And when we're in an unstable position, the amount of force that we're able to produce against the resistance is going to be drastically minimized. And so an example of this would be, if maybe we can do a squat holding 50 pounds, but if I tell you to do a single leg squat, you're probably not going to be able to hold any weight. And so once we insert that stability challenge, the weight that we're going to be able to use lowers and lowers and lowers. And that's why Pilates isn't optimal long term if we want muscle growth.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think what happens is that, um, also you get really good at some of those small kind of like I think it's really hard in the beginning, and then you start to get used to it. And same with yoga. I think it gave me a lot of I do this kind of it's not really power yoga, but it's a challenging yoga, and I think it really changed my body and made me really strong. But then after a while I did realize that you do adapt and you get stronger, and then you have to add more challenges to the thing. So I think that's the name of the game. Speaking of kind of challenging your body, there is this huge push by certain influencers and people about weighted vests, going for a walk with a weighted vest that you know uh, increases bone density, that can help with caloric burn. And I know that you've had thoughts around that, and I think it's great because what happened is I think when I saw I had started a long time ago when I started wearing a weighted vest. I started to add a little bit of jumping and lunges to it. And I realize now that that is actually essential. So tell us about this whole weighted vest situation.
So, if you're using the weighted vest as load to do other exercises, so we talked about how body weight squats or lunges might be difficult at first, but then we're going to need to add some weight. So, if you wanted to add a weighted vest instead of holding some dumbbells, then that's perfectly fine. But that's not the same as going for a walk. And so I think this is where the disconnect starts to happen, because in order to facilitate muscle growth or provide a sufficient stimulus for bone, what we need is a more direct stimulus than just walking. And so the data shows that people who are even wearing these vests for 8 to 10 hours a day, if you're not doing any exercise,
Mhm.
then this isn't effective for muscle. This isn't even effective for fat loss, even wearing it for 8 to 10 hours per day. And so then what this marketed as is go for a 30-minute walk. And so if it's not working wearing 8 to 10 hours a day, certainly the results we would expect from a 30-minute walk are going to be much lower than that. And the other thing to keep in mind is that sometimes these vests are really uncomfortable and people start experiencing some back pain, and they have been told that this is essential for their bone health or for their muscle health or to help with fat loss. And it's really not. It's really overhyped. Like I said, if you want to use it as resistance to actually do exercise, then it's viable in certain situations. But the only reason to wear it on a walk is if it gets you to go for a walk you wouldn't otherwise go on.
So, in terms of muscle, bone, fat loss, what's the best way to wear a weighted vest? Is it just while you're actually doing a workout?
If you want to, for example, let's say I have some grip issues and it's uncomfortable for me to hold dumbbells, but I don't have access to a gym, and for some reason I have a weighted vest, and so I can do my squats and lunges wearing that vest. I'm on board with that. But the walking application is very different, because think about when you're doing a squat or a lunge and you're moving through kind of full range of motion and we're getting that muscle contraction. That is the stimulus that is going to be effective for muscle and also for bone. But when we're just going for a walk, we're not getting enough of the impact or enough of that contraction to really be effective for either.
When people wear it for 8 to 10, the studies that where people wore it for 8 to 10 hours, it is surprising that there was no real benefit, or because when you see people, I see people on social, I see people in real life like wearing it all day long, and intuitively it's like, whoa, like they're probably getting some benefits from sitting in a meeting or like walking to their lunch spot, but like the studies just don't show that.
No, and I think if we think about the anyone who has obesity, if walking with a weighted vest were really effective for weight loss, then obesity could be managed really effectively by instructing walking, because you're
Yeah.
kind of already wearing a weighted vest, and we don't
Yeah.
see that. And that, it's because the even if you're burning more calories than your watch says so. The way that our metabolism is going to adapt to that is such that we're more and more and more physically active, and then other components of energy expenditure start to get down regulated. And so it isn't just a kind of easy swap of, oh, I burned 250 calories, so now I can eat 250 calories. It's always an uneven scale that adapts over time.
So, do you wear weighted vest in any circumstance?
I do not. I've never tried one. I don't really, honestly, I think the sweaty factor, it was kind of off-putting to me.
Yeah, that's
But if I wanted to make a walk more challenging, I would go on a hike with some hills, or I'd walk on an
hmm
inclined treadmill. There are ways to make your walk harder without
yeah.
inserting a weighted vest.
Yeah, I think it's kind of just like a trend. I love it. I think though it is really disconcerting to know that like all of this kind of hype around it is not really panning out. And I think just like you said, I think now I use it in the way that like when I have some time to do squats or lunges or jump, I'll use it as a way to kind of add a little bit of load so I don't have to hold dumbbells or whatever. But it is interesting because it's all the rage right now. So would you say the same thing about rucking, kind of like that trend?
I think for people who are training to go on a really big trip that involves a lot, hiking with a pack, then certainly it's relevant for them. But
Yeah.
for your average person, I mean, again, if you enjoy it and this is
Yeah.
what's going to get you physically active, then I'm here for it. I just think we need to be really honest about the benefits, because what I see is it marketed as this kind of one size fits all solution where if you're doing this, then you don't need to do any other exercise. And that I think is a bit dishonest.
Yeah, I think and I think it's very trendy. And a lot of people do think that that's kind of all. I see people all the time saying that that's kind of the only workout that they do. Um, and they count it as kind of their resistance training. And I think that can be problematic. And it's good that we're talking about this because a lot of people have this question. Okay, let's talk about creatine. Hot topic. I just did a post on this recently, and I'd love to get your thoughts about the marketing of creatine versus like the reality of creatine.
Creatine has been around for a really long time, and there's tons and tons of data on creatine. And if you're somebody who is lifting weights, doing high intensity exercise performance, you might find that around 5 grams of creatine per day will get you that extra rep. So we talked about if you do a set of 10, but you can't quite get that 11th, maybe it gets you the 11th. And that's about where the benefits end. Um, and it's for some people, they won't necessarily see any noticeable benefits at all. That said, it's fairly safe as supplements go. It's fairly inexpensive. And so if you're somebody who is really looking for, that last 1%, but you already have all the other stuff dialed in, then sure, give creatine a try. But I think what I'm seeing is this resurgence of kind of creatine for women being marketed,
Yeah.
even though it's creatine is creatine. It's just in a pink bottle with a higher price tag.
Yeah. And there's like this thing about like, if you use the female creatine, I haven't tried like the female versions of creatine, but I've heard that like the marketing around it is like, it's created for women, like it's going to cause less bloating and like more toning and like all of that stuff. So what you're saying is that's just marketing hype and there's really no reason to buy that.
There's a single ingredient in what you're buying, and it's creatine monohydrate. And so, however they want to package it, however they want to charge for it, if you're going to buy it, you can buy it at any supplement store. You can get it off Amazon, and it's not very expensive.
Yeah, I think
But
that's sorry. I was going to just interject to say, like, I think that's what's confusing for a lot of women is like they're going on Amazon or they're going to their local store, and they're seeing all these creatines that are super inexpensive, and then they're seeing all this creatine that's marketed to women. It's like you said, like with like women images on it, and saying it's better for you because we're not going to cause as much bloating, or all of these side effects that people get from creatine. And so I think it can be really confusing.
And to be clear, when you think about the bloating claim, what creatine does is, and if you are going to quote gain lean mass, or if you gain weight on the scale, you've gained weight from water that is in the muscle cell. And so it's not bloating in the sense of, oh, I know I'm on my period, I'm really bloated. That doesn't happen. It's in the muscle cell. And we're talking about really, really small effects here. This isn't something that you're going to see visually, but it's all the same ingredient, and however they're trying to brand it is coming at a higher price tag, and often with promises of benefits we don't really have a lot of data to support, like benefits for bone health. The data doesn't look great for bone. It did in animal models, but it doesn't really seem to pan out in humans. The other claim is that it's great for brain fog if you're somebody who's experiencing menopause related symptoms. And the promising creatine data when it comes to cognitive health is in clinical populations: Alzheimer's disease, traumatic brain injury, clinical depression in combination with an SSRI. So these are interesting, and it's also at much higher doses, like 20 grams as opposed to
Yeah.
5. And this is interesting for clinical populations. Just because you see something that's effective in that setting doesn't mean, oh, this is a brain booster for all healthy people. And that's sort of the journey that we've
Yeah.
gone on.
That is literally what everyone talks about is, the brain benefits in menopause. And I'm like, where it's so interesting how that the clinical population data turns into like everybody on menopause should have it to protect their brain. Like that is the messaging that's out there.
It's like saying all non-diabetics need insulin.
Yeah,
Like, I
that's
mean,
right. And
um,
also like, but there is one study that I really liked, about like when you have acute sleep loss. Like, so I'm a physician. I work with a lot of physicians who like take call or like are up all night. And I thought that was interesting. Like, what do you think of that? So it's basically like taking a large dose of creatine in the morning after you've had a really terrible night of sleep. Say you're a firefighter or a physician, or for occasional use to kind of like restore some of that brain cognitive function.
I think just the way it works, you probably would need to take it more often than just every so often. But I think right now we don't quite, the data is not quite there to say this is effective.
Mm.
That said, it's probably not going to be harmful. And so if you were someone in that situation and you wanted to experiment with it on yourself, then the only downside I would say is sometimes higher dose creatine causes a lot of GI discomfort. And
Hmm.
so you might find that you can't tolerate a dose of 15, 20, 25 grams.
Yeah, that actually is 100% true. So what you're saying is that creatine is not kind of the essential supplement of menopause.
No, there is no essential supplement of menopause. And that's one of the problems in this moment is that we're kind of focusing on these small potatoes and forgetting about the big ticket items that really improve health and longevity for women.
I mean, I think that's 100% true. I think it's always so easy to say, like, oh, drink the celery juice or like have the creatine. And it's much harder to be disciplined in your diet and to be disciplined about your exercise and to be disciplined about sleep and sunlight, and all of those things. It's so much easier to be like, oh, can I just take this thing to help me? So I think this is a great conversation. I think everyone is going to really benefit from it because I think when you go on Instagram or TikTok, you're getting very different messaging. You're getting like, buy my program, or you're getting, this superfood. And I'm one of those people who talks about, foods that can be useful to improve your health or whatever. But I always say, that if you're eating a kiwi fruit with the skin on, that's because it's part of a healthy diet and you're looking for more fruits and vegetables. It's not like, oh, the kiwi fruit is going to solve all your problems. So I think that's the problematic messaging that's happening. There's a lot of menopause and perimenopause chatter on social media. Like, why do you think it's having such a moment?
I think it's good that we're having an open dialogue because for years women didn't really talk about it, and that's really unfortunate. And so I think that part is good. The unfortunate part is this is a group that is pretty vulnerable, confused, in some cases experiencing changes to their body composition they don't really understand, in some cases experiencing menopause related symptoms that can be just really, really draining. And that creates a perfect storm for people to come in and sell you something
Yeah.
because you're desperate, and so you're willing to pay whatever the monthly fee is or order the supplement stack or whatever it is. And again, unfortunately, this doesn't help because whatever the supplement stack is or the special menopause diet, these are solutions that aren't real solutions because they're not addressing the actual issue that these individuals are experiencing. And so in some ways it's sort of a distraction from doing the things that we know work. And so you have people going on one diet and then 6 weeks later saying this isn't working for me, and then we go on another diet and eventually we land on something that, oh, we lost weight. You lost weight because you were in a calorie deficit, not because there was some magic about the ketogenic diet or fasting or whatever you landed on.
So when you say kind of people are going on these kind of excursions, what are those mainstays that people, I think it bears repeating, and what are the things that people should be concentrating on?
Exercise is extremely important. I am a muscle physiology researcher, so I will tell everybody to lift weights. Muscle is very important. If in any way you can, please do. But just generally speaking, whatever exercise you'll do consistently will have huge, huge benefits, not only for your health, for your body composition, for overall physical function as we age. It's really, really important. When we think about fat loss, then we need to address the diet. And there's no one size fits all diet. Carbohydrates aren't bad, fats aren't bad, seed oils aren't bad. We need to stop with the kind of fear mongering about this nutrient and that nutrient or this whole group of foods. Ultimately, we want to consume a well-rounded, nutritious diet. And if fat loss is a priority, then the calories we consume matter. That is going to be the biggest thing you can focus on. And you have to be patient because fat loss doesn't happen in a week. It doesn't always happen in a month. We need to stay consistent and be patient because these things take time.
Yeah, and then there's this whole world, and we'll just touch on it, of um, misunderstanding that there is a complete metabolic shutdown during the menopausal transition. Um, can you address that?
We know that hormonal changes during the transition vary between women. And so for some women, that perimenopause period is only a year. For some women, it can be 4 years. And there's everyone in between. And the people who tend to have the worst symptoms tend to have these really erratic hormone fluctuations that are unpredictable. And that's not everybody. And so your unique experience is probably not going to be the experience of your next door neighbor or your sister. That's important to acknowledge. So we want to address what's pertinent for you. There isn't like this kind of one size fits all, this is what you do for the menopause transition.
Yeah.
There is likely something to do with the hormone fluctuations that affects body fat distribution in some people. So when we look at large data sets, about 60% of women start to experience weight gain at and post menopause will continue to gain weight. But everybody's estrogen declined. So it can't just be about estrogen, or we would see it in 100%, and we don't.
Yeah.
And so clearly it's more complicated than that. And remember, what we can control is our physical activity and our diet. And so, regardless of the underlying mechanism, although that might be scientifically interesting, what's actionable and practical for the women who are trying to improve their health and improve their body composition is that we have these things that we know work. And so let's use them.
And, just last thing I want you to touch on is I think there's this big push for HRT these days that everyone and anyone, I mean, I have people that are younger, like in nowhere near perimenopause, or like very young people that feel like they're going to miss out if they don't start on hormones early, because there are people who start them, there are practitioners who say like the earlier you start the better, and then you won't have this experience. Can you speak on that?
We know that hormone therapy is very effective for symptoms, but all of the promises around these other factors that it's going to prevent body fat gain or preserve muscle loss or grow muscle, I even see those claims. We do not have the data to support that. There are potential secondary benefits for bone health, and depending where you live in the world, if you're on an estrogen based hormone therapy for your symptoms, then you might get kind of secondary benefits for bone. But other than that, the claims that everyone needs to be on it and it's going to kind of solve everything related to menopause, we need to be patient and we need to follow the science, because when we look at muscle, for example, you look at people who are been on an estrogen based therapy and people who haven't, there's no difference. It's not harming you, but it's not helping you. And so to say that just take the hormones and don't worry about the diet or the exercise is really, really misleading.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Dr. Lauren, thank you so much for being here on the Save Yourself podcast. Tell us kind of where to find more about you, what you're working on, what you're excited about, what tips, any last tips that you have.
Sure. You can follow me on Instagram, Dr. Lauren CS1. I own a monthly research review with 3 other PhDs. And so if you're somebody who really likes to dive into the research, but wants to understand how to interpret it and critically analyze, then you can check that out. That's massresearchreview.com.
Awesome. I really, really thank you for your time. Where are you based?
I'm about a half hour from Toronto.
Oh, awesome. So it's uh, getting to be summer. Is that right? Or is already summer?
Yes.
Yes. I'm
It's
in.
summer, but it's kind of cool. It's a long sleeve day.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I trained in Boston and upstate New York. So I know what summer, there's a very like the days that you can actually be outside and really like enjoy are um, a few, and it's right now. So enjoy yourself. Thank you so much for taking the time to be indoors and speak to me and the entire audience. I think everyone is going to find so much value in this conversation, because these are literally the topics that I get questions about every single day. And I think just to talk it out and not to give like little sound bites on social media really does help, because it is sometimes nuanced. It's not like yes or no. It's like there is some conversation here. So thank you so much for being here. And I hope we can do this again soon.
I love that. Thank you.
Awesome.